Excellencies, distinguished participants, I hereby declare open the 5th meeting of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. We will continue with the high-level segment. I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Vera Kravid, Minister of Justice, Parliamentary Affairs and Women's Rights of Sao Tome and Principe.
Vice President of the Human Rights Council, Excellencies, distinguished representatives of member states, ladies and gentlemen. It was with a deep sense of duty that the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe takes the floor at this, the 61st session of the United Nations Human Rights Council, which is recognized as one of the foremost multilateral fora for reflection, dialogue and coordination on the subject of promoting and protecting human rights around the world. The current session occurs against a particularly testing international situation, which is characterized by the escalation of armed conflict, deepening social inequalities, and increased impacts of climate change, as well as the emergence of new challenges linked to digital technologies. It's against this backdrop that it's not just a legal necessity to reiterate the central role of human rights, but it is an ethical and political requirement that is undeniable. Excellencies, Sao Tome and Principe fully concurs with the view that human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent and interrelated. So, they must be promoted through mainstreaming them in public policies, development models, and peace and security strategies. It is in this regard that we attach the utmost importance to the debates in this session, which will be held on integrating human rights in sustainable development policies. This is because we are aware that lasting economic progress cannot be achieved without social justice, and nor can inclusive growth be achieved unless human dignity is respected. For developing island states like Sao Tome and Principe, this approach is absolutely vital in order to ensure that the most vulnerable groups are not left behind. Vice President, the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe also underscores the importance of the debate on human rights and climate change, which is a matter of life or death for small island states. Climate change is not just an environmental issue. Climate change poses a direct threat to the effective enjoyment of the rights to life, housing, food, health and development. With this in mind, we defend a human rights-based approach to climate action, which promotes climate justice, international solidarity, and appropriate funding for adaptation and resilience for the most exposed communities. This subject is all the more important for the specific case of Sao Tome and Principe, an island nation, because its entire territory has been recognised by UNESCO as a global biosphere reserve. So this poses an even greater challenge for sustainable development. Excellencies, another central subject in this session is that of promoting and protecting the rights of women and girls, including the eradication of gender-based violence and harmful practices. Sao Tome and Principe reiterates that gender equality is not just a social goal, but it is a defining legal principle of the democratic rule of law. Women's full and effective participation in political, economic and social life is sine qua non for achieving fairer, more peaceful and resilient societies. It is in this sphere that we would like to reiterate the need to strengthen the mechanisms for prevention, protection and accountability, as well as the need to invest in education, changing discriminatory social norms and the economic empowerment of women in close coordination with civil society and international partners. Vice President, the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe will also take part in the debates on protecting children's rights, notably in the context of armed conflict, as well as promoting inclusive infrastructure for persons with disabilities. We'd like to underscore that inclusion cannot be understood as a favour, but it is a fundamental human rights and a state obligation. When it comes to new digital technology, we're aware that they have the potential to transform the promotion of human rights, but we'd also like to raise the alarm about the risks they pose when used without the appropriate ethical and legal frameworks. That's why we defend that digital governance should focus on human beings and safeguard privacy, combat algorithmic profiling and ensure equal access to technology. Excellencies, Sao Tome and Principe firmly believes in multilateralism as a vital tool for tackling today's global challenges. International cooperation, constructive dialogue and mutual respect between states must continue to be the most effective ways for strengthening the international human rights system and ensure its credibility and effectiveness. We reiterate that we stand fully ready to cooperate with the Council, international and regional human rights mechanisms and with all partners that are committed to building a fairer, more inclusive and more peaceful world. Please allow me to conclude by reiterating that the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe will continue to firmly and dutifully defend the central role of human rights as the bedrock of human dignity, peace and sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I have now the floor I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Tete Antonio, Minister of External Relations of Angola. Excellency, you have the floor.
Senhor Presidente,
President, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Angola congratulates Your Excellency on the way in which you are guiding the work of this 61st session and reiterating your commitment to the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, as well as your commitment to promoting and protecting human rights based on dialogue, cooperation and mutual respect between states. President, this session occurs at a particularly testing time in international affairs, which is characterized by the escalation of armed conflict, terrorism, forced displacement and the growing impact of climate change. These phenomena continue to create serious human rights violations and to disproportionately affect the most vulnerable people, particularly women and children. For Angola, this session has a special significance since we've been elected to the Council. Now, it's not the first time we've been a member. Angola also discharged mandates during the periods 2007 to 2010, 2015 to 2017, and 2018 to 2020. We undertook those duties in a constructive fashion and were guided by the principles of dialogue, multilateral cooperation, respect for sovereignty, and a non-selective and non-politicised approach to human rights. Excellencies, protecting human rights starts with the unconditional defence of human life. The Constitution of the Republic of Angola, in line with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and the African Charter of People and Human Rights, enshrines the inviolability of life as one of the core values of Angolan society. Defending life also means creating conditions for a decent life with access to justice, health, education, housing and employment. The Angolan government considers protecting life as a legal duty and a moral commitment to human development, social justice and human dignity. It's against this backdrop that Angola wishes to reiterate its firm position against the death penalty, which we have already abolished, and its commitment to valuing life as a fundamental human right, in line with international efforts to universalise the abolition of the death penalty. President, Angola is a state party to 7 of the 9 core international human rights treaties, and we have gradually strengthened our domestic legal framework. Amongst others, we have ratified the Convention Against Torture, the optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights concerning the abolition of the death penalty, the International Convention on eliminating all forms of racial discrimination, and the International Convention for protecting all persons from enforced disappearance. Angola will continue to ratify and implement other relevant international instruments, including those which strive to protect vulnerable groups and promote human dignity. President, the National Human Rights Strategy adopted through Presidential Decree 100/20, which has already been implemented to a degree of over 90%, is one of the pillars of national public policies. It is based on decentralisation, human rights education, institutional capacity building, protecting vulnerable groups and dialogue with civil society. And this is in line with the National Development Plan 2023 to 2027 and the long-term strategy Angola 2050. Despite the progress we have achieved, Angola is aware of the fact that there are outstanding challenges, notably when it comes to ensuring universal access to basic services, reducing inequalities and strengthening social responsibility. Now, we take up these challenges in realistic fashion with a high sense of commitment and openness to international cooperation. Angola observes strict cooperation with the Council mechanisms, including the Universal Periodic Review and the special procedures. We have received various visits from mandate holders and responded constructively to the recommendations received on the basis of open dialogue and technical assistance, as was demonstrated by the visit of the Special Rapporteur for eliminating discrimination against persons affected by leprosy, an international independent expert on the effects of external debt on human rights. Angola firmly condemns all acts which run counter to fundamental rights, including the freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. The Angolan government is committed to ensuring that all institutions act within the law and respect for fundamental rights, and we have strengthened our mechanisms for prevention, accountability and social dialogue. Angola has also undertaken deep-seated reform in the justice sector with a view to strengthening the rule of law, combating impunity and ensuring effective access to justice for all. At the same time, the country is investing in ongoing training for defence and security forces in the area of human rights with a view to ensure that they act proportionately in a preventive fashion and in strict compliance with applicable international and national standards. Whenever there are allegations of abuse, Angolan authorities reiterate their commitment to undertaking independent, credible and transparent investigations, promoting accountability and strengthening public trust in institutions. As part of these efforts, Angola attaches particular importance to the technical assistance provided by the Human Rights Council and its mechanisms. Angola believes that there are no human rights without peace, nor sustainable peace without inclusive development. Promoting a culture of peace, human rights education and women's participation is a cross-cutting priority for our work at national, regional and international level. As we begin a new mandate in the Council, Angola reiterates its steadfast commitment to promoting, protecting and defending human rights in line with the Universal Declaration, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and other international instruments to which we are a party. We wish to extend our thanks to the Human Rights Council for its work, and we reiterate that we stand absolutely ready to cooperate constructively with this body and with all its mechanisms as we strive to find solutions which benefit not only Angola and Africa, but the entire international community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Ana Isabel Xavier, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Portugal.
Senhora Vice-Presidente.
Vice President of the Human Rights Council, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to begin by extending my thanks to the Secretariat for enabling me to take the floor in Portuguese. It is the most widely spoken language in the Southern Hemisphere and is shared by over 260 million people. Its presence here in this council reflects linguistic diversity which enriches multilateralism and strengthens the universal character of human rights. We live in particularly testing times for multilateralism, in which trust in international institutions is being eroded, human rights increasingly politicised, and that there is a trend for unilateral business-like approaches which pose serious challenges to the rules-based international order. Respect for human rights cannot be disassociated from lasting peace and sustainable development. You can't achieve any of these goals against a backdrop of systematic human rights violations. Thus, Portugal is a firm defender of the equality among the three pillars of the United Nations: peace and security, human rights and development. In view of new and emerging challenges, it's absolutely urgent that we prepare the international human rights architecture to preempt risks and respond more effectively to violations and ensure that perpetrators of violations are held to account. It's against this backdrop that the Human Rights Council plays a unique role, particularly when it comes to promoting dialogue and cooperation. That's why Portugal defends that this council's rank should be raised to that of a main body of the United Nations. This is a vital step to strengthening the coherence, visibility and effectiveness of the human rights agenda. Its credibility must also be based on its independence, and so Portugal wishes to stress the need to safeguard the autonomy of the High Commissioner and his office and mechanisms so that they can discharge their mandate fully, free from political pressure and with the necessary human and financial resources. Ladies and gentlemen, the international human rights system should be a safe haven for the most fragile and exposed. Portugal will continue to be a reliable, consistent and committed partner to dialogue and the inclusion of different stakeholders, such as small island developing states, least developed countries, civil society and the most vulnerable groups in our society. In line with this commitment, in this session of the Council, along with Brazil, we will be presenting the triennial resolution on mental health and human rights, of which we are honoured to be the pen holder. The resolution unequivocally states that persons with mental health conditions have human rights and that there is a need to combat stigma, discrimination and coercive practices as they are human rights violations. We also promote a human rights-based approach, inclusion and deinstitutionalisation. Portugal will also continue to promote the central role of national mechanisms for implementation, reporting and follow-up in order to close the gap between international commitments and what we see on the ground. We will also focus on other priority human rights areas such as promoting economic, social and cultural rights, protecting the human rights of youth, combating racism, abolishing the death penalty and promoting human rights-based policies on HIV, AIDS and drugs, as well as the right to a healthy environment. We remain firmly convinced that the dreadful proliferation of conflict that we see today requires a resolute response, and that's why Portugal defends mediation, preventive diplomacy and international humanitarian law. These are vital and complementary tools for preventing the escalation of conflicts and to better protect civilians. This unwavering commitment to defending human rights and promoting dialogue characterises Portugal's activities not only in this council, but it is also one of the bedrocks of Portuguese foreign policy and underpins Portugal's candidacy to be a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council for the period 2027-2028. Portugal thus will continue to be a committed partner, constructive and predictable. We will work with all stakeholders in order to strengthen the universal human rights architecture, protect its integrity and ensure that, in fact, no one is left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Matheus Phineas Saize, Minister of Justice, Constitutional and Religious Affairs of Mozambique. You have the floor, Excellency.
Obrigado, Sr. Presidente.
Thank you, President. I would like to begin this statement by extending warm greetings to the representatives of member states, the Bureau of the Human Rights Council, And also on behalf of the government of the Republic of Mozambique, we would like to express our gratitude for the honour of having been invited to participate in the high-level segment of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. We wish to seize this opportunity to reiterate our appreciation for the work of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, His Excellency Mr. Volker Turk, as well as his dedicated team for the work carried out to promote and protect human rights around the world. Excellencies, following the October 2024 elections, which were marked by post-electoral outbreaks of violence, the government of the Republic of Mozambique, under the leadership of His Excellency Daniel Francisco Chapo, President of the Republic, launched an inclusive national dialogue. This aims at promoting national reconciliation, reducing political tension, and strengthening democratic stability. With regard to the situation in the northern province of Cabo Delgado, this province continues to be affected by attacks carried out by armed groups, as has been the case since 2017, and which has resulted in mass displacement, loss of life, and the destruction of key infrastructure. By way of response, Mozambique has approved the national strategy for preventing and combating terrorism and violent extremism, as well as the National Action Plan for the management of internally displaced persons, covering the period 2025 to 2029. The aim of this plan is to strengthen protection and assistance to affected populations and host communities, as well as to promote lasting solutions for resettlement and reintegration. At the same time, the country faces increasingly severe impacts of climate change. The recent torrential rain in January and the intense tropical storm Gezani affected the provinces of Maputo, Gaza, Sofala and Inhambane. This caused loss of lives, destruction of housing, with significant damage to public, social and economic infrastructure. This has all had a direct consequence on the enjoyment of human rights, particularly the rights to life, housing, health and education. Hence, we recognise the need to strengthen national mechanisms for the prevention, mitigation and response to natural disasters, as well as the need to promote climate adaptation and resilience policies. Excellencies, Mozambique maintains a standing invitation to the special procedures and in October 2025 received the visit of the Subcommittee on the Prevention of Torture. Their recommendations are currently under consideration, one of the most relevant of them being to strengthen the National Human Rights Commission as the national preventive mechanism against torture. It will have special privileges and immunities so that it can conduct monitoring and inspection of prison facilities and police custody facilities. The country is also awaiting a visit from the Special Rapporteur on the promotion and protection of human rights while countering terrorism and the independent expert on human rights and climate change. Within the framework of the Universal Periodic Review, Mozambique will be submitting its report to the fourth cycle covering the period 2021-2025. It will reflect the progress achieved and persistent challenges and was prepared through an inclusive and participatory process which involves state institutions, civil society, the private sector and local communities. Our report will be examined during the 52nd session of the Working Group of the Universal Periodic Review to be held in May of this year. In the field of business and human rights, Mozambique was admitted in 2024 as an engaged government in the Voluntary Principles on Security and Human Rights initiative and is currently preparing its respective national action plan in line with the United Nations guiding principles on business and human rights. When it comes to strengthening the prevention and combating of trafficking in persons, on the 30th of July 2025, Mozambique joined up to the Blue Heart campaign against trafficking in persons, which is led by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. This reiterates Mozambique's commitment to prevention, victim protection and prosecuting the perpetrators of this crime. Excellencies, as part of the voluntary commitments undertaken on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, I wish to inform you that we are currently engaged in the process of ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, as well as our accession to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. And I'm also pleased to inform you that as part of those voluntary commitments, at midday today, in the wings of this session, Mozambique signed the Memorandum of Understanding with the Office of the Commissioner for Human Rights to establish a country office in Mozambique. By way of conclusion, we reiterate our trust in the Human Rights Council as the key platform for strengthening international cooperation and for promoting universal and effective respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Excellency. I have now the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Madame Ima Torfaus, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Andorra.
Monsieur le Vice-Président,
Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. The 20th anniversary of the Human Rights Council is a good occasion for us to take stock of the activities of this Council and to consider together the role and future of this intergovernmental organization, body. For the Principality of Andorra, I can say that we are resolutely committed to the protection and promotion of human rights, and for us, the Council must remain a central pillar of UN multilateralism that we remain highly attached to at a time when the global order is seriously shaken. In a geopolitical context where we are seeing flagrant attacks on rights and on human dignity, and these are becoming ever more widespread, the government of Andorra wishes to reassert our firm commitment to international law, to the UN Charter, and the universality, indivisibility and interdependence of all human rights. The Human Rights Council should continue to be a space for dialogue where each state, whatever its size, however powerful it is, can make its contribution, a specific contribution to a more respectful world, respectful of fundamental values. Small states have a specific and constructive role to play in the Council. They do not have geostrategic interests, so they can facilitate exchanges of views, they can bring positions closer together and help to build consensus. On the 5th of November 2025, it was my honor to preside over the delegation which presented the UPR of the Principality. We consider the UPR as a unique mechanism for open dialogue, which is transparent and constructive between states. We really benefited from this exercise. Our government accepted 108 recommendations and resolutely committed itself to implement these together with the competent bodies and civil society. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today we are facing a multiplication of armed conflicts whose human consequences are devastating. Civilians, and in particular vulnerable persons, are paying the highest price. In this context, allow me to raise the issue of the protection of children. The figures we have on forced recruitment, kidnappings and sexual violence are alarming. How many children have been stolen away from their lives? How many dreams have been shattered, as we see from these statistics? So we should recall that the protection of children is a universal obligation, and Andorra has committed itself, alongside the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflicts, and together with other partners, in a campaign entitled Prove It Matters. This should strengthen prevention, to require accountability and to combat impunity for those who violate the rights of children. Andorra is also highly committed to promoting and protecting the rights of women and girls in efforts to guarantee equality and to combat all forms of gender-based violence, which remains of great concern in many parts of the world. Equality is a cross-cutting priority in our public policies. We have an Equality Observatory and the Andorran Institute for Women, and we integrate equality in educational programs from the very earliest age and hold campaigns to break down stereotypes, in particular to encourage girls to pursue scientific and technical studies. We are endeavouring to reduce vocational discrimination, to allow the reconciliation of family and professional lives, and to promote the representation of women in all decision-making spaces, nationally and internationally.
Vice President, the highlights of this year for us have been the signature and the forthcoming ratification of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Thus, we wish to underscore the importance of protecting cultural and linguistic diversity. Multilingualism is vital for equality between peoples and for equal participation in the multilateral system. Against a backdrop of budgetary restrictions and liquidity challenges facing the United Nations system, it is absolutely vital that translation interpreting services be maintained. Ensuring full access to information and debates in all the official languages is a prerequisite for sovereign equality between states. As co-facilitators of the resolution on multilingualism, we particularly welcome the initiative of the Francophony organization, which is to launch a United Nations group of friends of multilingualism. As we commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Council, Andorra reiterates its unwavering commitment to human rights and effective multilateralism based on international law. May our deeds rise to the level of our words. May the future that we hope to build be the result of the commitment which we are making today together in this Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Badr Ahmed Mohammed Abdullati, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Immigration and Egyptian Expatriates of Egypt, via video message.
In the name of God, Mr. President, Mr. High Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, we congratulate Indonesia on assuming the presidency of the Council. I speak to you today at the outset of Egypt's membership in the Council. We reaffirm our commitment to the protection and promotion of human rights at the national and international levels. This session is being held in unprecedented challenges that affect the promotion of human rights around the world, in addition to escalating conflicts and regional tensions and international polarization. The rule-based international order is passing a delicate phase that tests its resilience. What we have seen over the past 2 years in Gaza underscores a fundamental truth. There can be no credible human rights system if international law is applied selectively. Adherence to the principle of international law is not an option, it's an indivisible obligation. Respect for human rights is not a luxury that can be postponed in times of crises. Rather, it's the safety valve for achieving peace, stability, and development. With regards to Gaza, Egypt hosted the Sharm el-Sheikh summit last October, which brought an end to the aggression against the Gaza Strip. We stress the importance of halting the grave violations that continue to be committed against the Palestinian people, including unilateral measures in the West Bank, ensuring full humanitarian access and accelerating early recovery projects so as to grant Palestinians the dignified living conditions to which they have long aspired. Our shared responsibility requires preserving the Council as a platform for dialogue, cooperation, exchange of expertise, and upholding a spirit of consensus, away from politicization and polarization. Egypt's national experience confirms that progress in the field of human rights is achieved through political will, dialogue, and the promotion of a human rights culture. Under the directives of His Excellency, the President of Egypt, Egypt has witnessed tangible leaps towards strengthening human rights through institutional and legislative frameworks as well as in practice. Egypt has recently completed parliamentary elections. These efforts have been based on openness and dialogue with all stakeholders, as well as intensified engagement with relevant international and regional mechanisms, foremost among them the UPR. Its recommendation represent one of the main pillars in complementing the implementation of the National Human Rights Strategy and preparing the second strategy. Integrated initiatives have also been taken in Egypt to strengthen economic, social, and cultural rights with priority to women, youth, children, persons with disabilities, in addition to launching a national dialogue and activating the Presidential Pardon Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, human rights cannot be separated from the right to development. Poverty, food insecurity, mounting debt, and the lack of technology and financing are all structural challenges that hinder the efforts of developing and African countries to fulfill their obligations. Adequate attention must be given to these issues, as well as to racism and to combating hate speech and extremism. We need to restore balance in the work of the Council and to address human rights through a comprehensive, equal, and objective perspective, and to build the capacities of states and their national institutions. In conclusion, I seize this opportunity to reaffirm Egypt's support for the role played by the High Commissioner and to commend the ongoing cooperation with his office.
Thank you, Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. George Gerapetritis, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Greece. Excellency, you have the floor.
Secretary General, High Commissioner, Mr. President, Excellencies, it is a distinct honor to address the high-level segment of the 61st session. We stand at a historic milestone today. 20 years have passed since we established this Council to replace the Commission on Human Rights with a stronger, more credible body. Looking back, we have reasons to be proud. We created the Universal Periodic Review, ensuring no state is immune from scrutiny. We expanded the special procedures, giving a voice to the voiceless. However, anniversaries demand honesty. We mark this milestone in the shadow of a severe liquidity crisis. This is not merely a bureaucratic hurdle. It is an existential threat. We cannot protect rights on a budget deficit. Greece's message is simple. We must match our rhetoric with resources. We reaffirm our unwavering support for the Office of the High Commissioner. However, regarding the UN80 milestone, we must be honest about the challenges ahead. Yet, Greece encourages every effort to transform this system. We need a UN that addresses its weaknesses constructively. A UN that is cost-efficient, effective, and fully accountable. Only then can it fulfill its mission in a balanced way across all three of its pillars. Mr. President, beyond this internal crisis, we face a geopolitical polycrisis. The chain linking peace, development, and human rights is breaking. In Europe, we mark 4 years of war in Ukraine, 4 years of aggression and devastation. Greece stands firmly by Ukraine's sovereignty. This is a defense of democracy and international law against revisionism. While we welcome genuine efforts for peace, we must address the human cost. In the Russian-occupied territories, a human rights vacuum prevails. But the darkest crime is clear, the forced deportation of Ukrainian children. Thousands have been stripped of their names, stripped of their history. This attempt to steal a nation's future must stop. Our concern extends to Syria. Stability requires inclusion. Syrians must decide their future free from foreign interference. Every ethnic and religious community, including Christians, need a seat at the table. Greece stands ready to contribute to humanitarian aid and reconstruction. Turning to our immediate neighborhood, the Middle East, Greece welcomes the release of the hostages with profound relief. This is a triumph of diplomacy. It proves that dialogue saves lives. But this was only the first step. We must urgently transition to a permanent truce. However, silence alone is not enough. The humanitarian situation in Gaza remains catastrophic. We cannot look away. Greece is fully committed to the stabilization effort, but we must return to the only viable political horizon. The two-state solution, security for Israel, a sovereign state for the Palestinians. This is the only path. Looking further south, Sudan faces the world's largest displacement crisis. Famine is stalking the land and sexual violence is weaponized. We must focus on ensuring accountability. In Iran, we have a moral obligation to stand by the people against violence targeting peaceful protesters. And in Afghanistan, we confront systematic gender persecution. Women and girls are being erased from public life. We simply cannot accept a world where half the population is invisible. Mr. President, how does Greece respond to this polycrisis? First, as proud members of the European Union, we recognize the Union as the vital anchor preserving multilateralism in a fragmented world. We advocate for a Europe that meets global expectations, yielding its significant economic, regulatory, and trade power to promote human rights and defend the rule of law. Second, as a non-permanent member of the Security Council, our response is anchored in clear principles. We remain faithful to the UN Charter. Our compass is the universal application of international law, serving as a bridge between divided worlds. The Charter is not an à la carte menu. It is the monolithic foundation of our coexistence. We operate on the triad of dialogue, democracy, and diplomacy. We do not believe in a world of might makes right. we believe in a world where rights define might. To speak with authority abroad, one must act with integrity at home. We are implementing in Greece a national action plan to eliminate racism. We are combating human trafficking. We are breaking glass ceilings to achieve gender equality. And we are implementing a comprehensive strategy to address juvenile delinquency and protect our youth. Regarding migration, Greece has consistently done its utmost to save lives at sea and grant asylum to those entitled to protection. However, we place equal emphasis on combating smuggling networks and the instrumentalization of migration. We must prioritize effective returns and innovative solutions. Excellencies, based on these principles, allow me to highlight Greece's candidacy for the Human Rights Council for the term 2028-2030. Our vision rests on one significant pillar: education. We see hate speech rising. We see discrimination. Law provides a fair framework, but laws alone are not enough. What cannot be compromised is a citizen's conscience. As the great philosopher Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. This is our guide. Our goal is to foster a global human rights culture. We must educate the next generation's hearts. We must teach empathy, not just rules. If a child learns that human dignity is sacred, that child will grow into a leader who respects peace. This is the only defense against chaos. To this end, Greece looks forward to the launch of the Global Alliance for Human Rights that was announced officially yesterday. We need an initiative that brings together governments, the private sector, and civil society. We must place human rights back where they belong, at the center of political life, much like the Helsinki Accords did for Europe in the 1970s. Mr. President, 20 years ago, we built this council. Now, we must protect it. We must fix the budget, we must stop the wars, we must educate our children, the future generations. Greece is here to listen, we're here to cooperate, we are here to build bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Olivier Nduhungirehe, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda. You have the floor, Excellency.
Excellency, Mr. Vice President of the Human Rights Council, Excellencies, distinguished guests, good afternoon. I wish to begin by commending the Human Rights Council for its work and the importance of this high-level segment, which allows member states to reiterate their political commitment to the protection and promotion of human rights around the world. Excellencies, Rwanda underscores the persistent denial of the right to live in dignity, which continues to afflict millions worldwide, particularly in conflict-affected regions of our continent. For decades, our region has suffered from ethnic extremism and genocide ideology. Today, these dangerous forces are again visible in Eastern DRC, where ethnic violence continues to threaten vulnerable communities. In North and South Kivu, Congolese Tutsi communities, including the Banyamulenge, are systematically targeted, discriminated against, and subjected to killings by Kinshasa-backed militias, as well as the Congolese army. Entire villages have been attacked through airstrikes and attack drones. Homes were burned down and destroyed, and families displaced in campaigns clearly designed to force these communities from their ancestral lands. In South Kivu, Banyamulenge communities have been driven into remote areas where access to markets, schools, grazing land, and medical services is severely restricted. Up to 150,000 people have been displaced over the past decade, and in North Kivu, populations live in constant fear of Kinshasa-backed militias promoting a radical anti-Tutsi ideology. Such acts are not random violence. They are calibrated intimidation aimed at demographic erasure. Excellencies, Rwanda has repeatedly warned this Council about escalating hate speech and persecution of the Congolese Tutsi. Regrettably, the absence of clear condemnation has emboldened the DRC government and its militias spreading ethnic incitement. In December 2025, the spokesperson of the Armed Forces of DRC, Major General Sylvain Ekenge, delivered a statement on national television qualifying Tutsi women, Congolese Tutsi women, as evil and warning his male compatriot to never marry them. This was not an isolated slip. It was premeditated. It was public and broadcasted nationally. It constitutes institutionalized hate speech. And Major General Ekenge was suspended only after these remarks provoked outrage, but he was never prosecuted. Such rhetoric dehumanizes an entire community and places women in particular danger. History demonstrates that when such narratives are normalized, violence soon follows, and violence did follow. Rwanda speaks from its painful experience. We know the cost of ignoring genocide ideology when it is openly articulated. We know the cost of turning a blind eye to genocidal acts when they are unfolding. On the ground, the consequences are evident. In Minembwe and surrounding territories in South Kivu, villages inhabited by Banyamulenge have been bombed and blockaded. Supply routes have been cut, markets closed, and access to humanitarian assistance obstructed. Communities have been left isolated, deprived of food, medicine, and basic services. The deliberate starvation and isolation of civilians because of their ethnicity is a grave violation of international humanitarian law. Excellencies, it is equally troubling that humanitarian access itself has been politicized. On the diktat of Kinshasa, attempts are being made to impose a single politically controlled channel for the delivery of assistance while dismissing or obstructing other viable and neutral options. Humanitarian aid must never be hijacked to serve political agendas. Furthermore, UN fact-finding efforts that fail to clearly identify incitement to ethnic hatred risk enabling further abuses. When investigations rely on selective testimony or avoid confronting genocide ideology directly, they undermine both credibility and prevention. Rwanda, therefore, calls upon the Human Rights Council to speak unequivocally against hate speech propagated by DRC representatives, to demand accountability for incitement to ethnic discrimination and persecution, and to ensure that humanitarian access is guided solely by neutrality, impartiality, and urgency. I will conclude, Excellencies, by recalling that every person, regardless of ethnicity or origin, is entitled to dignity, security, and protection. The credibility of this Council depends on its willingness to defend these principles impartially, consistently, and without fear from perpetrating regimes. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Lars Løkke Rasmussen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Denmark, via video message.
President, dear colleagues, it is an honor to address the Council. As we all know, human rights are not abstract principles. Human rights are a crucial part of the rule-based international order that form the very practical foundation of a good life and a stable and resilient societies. Yet, for millions of people around the world, this is not the reality. Human rights are violated every day and always with devastating consequences. Let me provide just a few examples. In Ukraine, Russia's ongoing full-scale invasion continues to cause immense human suffering. Civilians have been traumatized. Energy infrastructure has been destroyed during a harsh winter used as a weapon of war. Denmark therefore stands firmly with the Ukrainian people. In Iran, the authorities have once again brutally suppressed the people's protests for a better life, with thousands of civilians killed, injured, and arrested. We condemn this violent suppression of the protests and call on Iran to live up to its international obligations. In Gaza, we have seen positive developments with a fragile ceasefire, release of all hostages, and increased aid deliveries. However, the humanitarian situation remains deeply concerning, and the current aid levels are insufficient. In the West Bank, settler violence and expansion of illegal settlements undermine the prospects for a two-state solution, which is the only viable option for long-term peace. In Sudan, the conflict has created the world's largest humanitarian and a catastrophic human rights situation. Civilians face grave abuses with reports of ethnic cleansing, sexual and gender-based violence, and famine in several areas. The people of Sudan urgently need protection and assistance. President, these situations remind us of why the work of the Council matters. We must continue supporting independent monitoring. We must continue supporting accountability and continue to stand up for international law. Denmark remains as committed to the United Nations as ever. The UN plays a vital role in supporting a stable and just global order. At a time when the global order is tested, the UN remains the only place where the whole world can come together to advance peace, security, and human rights. Denmark will continue to engage constructively in this Council and with its members from all regions. We cannot afford to move backwards or give up on international law, or our shared goal must remain clear. We must fight for a world in which might does not make right, a world with peace, and a world where human rights are respected for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Oana Silvia Toiu, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Romania, via video message.
Mr. President, Mr. High Commissioner for Human Rights, Excellencies, we mark 20 years of the UN Human Rights Council, 20 years of making an impact, of striving for better standards at the service of humanity. It was then, 20 years ago, that Romania was preparing for the first EU member state to hold the presidency of this council since its creation. The world is different today. The multilateral system is not only under strain, it is under sustained strategic pressure. Armed conflicts persist. Democratic institutions are tested. Civic space narrows and information manipulation erodes trust. Climate and economic shocks amplify fragility. In such circumstances, consistency is key, and you can count on Romania to be a consistent partner. We have just completed our third mandate as member of the Human Rights Council. Last year, we also served as Vice President of the Bureau from the Eastern European Group. In our work, we focused on strengthening the preventive dimension of this Council's work, recognizing that resilience must be built before crises unfold. Our biennial resolution on human rights, democracy, and the rule of law, adopted by consensus and supported by 75 co-sponsoring states, reflects this approach. By placing education at its center, Romania advanced a forward-looking perspective, as there is no better investment in democratic resilience. Excellencies, as we look today around the globe, there is no room for misplaced optimism, although the imperative of optimism remains. Violence and escalation hotspots are increasing worldwide. We see it directly at our borders. While we mark these days 4 years of illegal war of aggression by Russia against Ukraine, an action that defies to the core the UN Charter principles. This illegal war alone directly affects approximately 7.5 million children, including at least 20,000 children illegally deported to Russia. We must bring these children back to their families. Women have not been spared by the Russian aggression either. In 2025 alone, more than 800 women were killed and nearly 5,000 were injured. These are not isolated cases. The human cost of conflict and dire living conditions worldwide is immense. Over 170 million people are forcibly displaced globally. These are not just numbers, but stories of hardships and of sufferance, but also stories of resilience. The fact that 1 in every 70 people on Earth has to leave its home is a personal, heartbreaking reality. Excellencies, we speak more and more about a changing world. Let me be clear. Romania's determination to bring a valuable contribution to peace and security, development, and the protection of human rights is as strong as ever. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, we opened our borders, provided shelter, and worked with United Nations agencies to deliver food and medicine. More than that, we made sure there is a warm home welcoming for everyone. In response to urgent humanitarian needs in Gaza, Romania supported the evacuation of 116 children and the accompanying family members. We organized 11 flights to facilitate these operations alongside partner countries. Women and girls remain central to Romania's action. We also need equal participation of women in public life as a condition for resilient democracies and sustainable peace. In terms of our political representation, we still have a lot of work to do. But within the Romanian MFA, gender balance in a diplomatic career is becoming a reality. This year, women held 57% of management positions and over 40% of heads of missions posts abroad. The new generation of diplomats is 70% women, which gives us the confidence of a balanced representation. Mr. President, human rights are not a standalone agenda. They are one of the 3 pillars enshrined in the UN Charter. They underpin the legitimacy and durability of the multilateral system itself, and we welcome High Commissioner Turk's efforts in this respect. Romania supports an integrated approach that mainstreams human rights across the UN system, including within the ongoing UN 80 initiative. We will contribute to better equip for the future our multilateral institutions, to our presidency of the UNDP, UNFPA, UNOPS Executive Board, and the membership in the Bureau of the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women. The international law and the UN Charter must be upheld, and the global human rights system must be strengthened. There is no opt-out option, and resilience is better built before you need it. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Juma Zuberi Homera, Minister for Constitutional and Legal Affairs of the United Republic of Tanzania. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my pleasure to represent the United Republic of Tanzania at this 61st sessions of the Human Rights Council. I wish to convey warm greetings from Her Excellency, Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, who remains a strong supporter of the Council and its important mandate. strengthening the promotion and the protection of human rights globally, while constructively addressing situations of concern, are noble and shared responsibilities consistent with the Constitution of the United Republic of Tanzania, which stipulates that the state authority and all its agencies are obliged to direct their policies and programs towards ensuring that human dignity is preserved and upheld according with the spirit of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Therefore, as I take the floor for the first time during this session, please allow me to assure you, Mr. Vice President, of my delegation's full support, constructive engagement and cooperation in your stewardship of the Council. Mr. Vice President, the United Republic of Tanzania continues to pursue a people-centered and a development-oriented approach to human rights. In this regard, in July 2025, the government launched the Tanzania Development Vision Agenda, Vision 2050, which is founded on the principle of good governance, peace, security, stability with a strong governance framework, grounded constitutionalism, the rule of law, and human rights. In advancing the right to health, the government launched the National Universal Health Insurance Scheme in January 2026, aimed at ensuring equitable, mandatory, and affordable access to healthcare services for all people, particularly low-income households. This reform is complemented by the expansion of health infrastructure, with the number of health facilities increasing from 8,549 in 2020 to 12,846 in 2025. Access to clean and safe water under the Water Sector Development Program has reached 72% in rural areas and 89% in urban areas. Similarly, electricity access now stands at 92% in urban areas and 76% in rural areas, reflecting sustained national efforts to enhance socio-economic resilience and inclusivity. Further, the 2,115 Mwalimu Nyerere Julius hydroelectric power project is nearing completion and is designed to double the country's electricity generation capacity and produce a surplus to meet national demand, facilitate industrial growth, and support regional energy integration through potential power export. The government is also establishing a national water grid from lake sources and the country's main rivers. The aim is to ensure that no region or community is left behind in accessing safe and clean water. In the education sector, the government continues to implement the fee-free education policy in primary and secondary schools, while beneficiaries of higher education loans increased from 149,472 in the 2020-2021 academic year to 245,384 in 2024-2025. To further ensure that youth remain active stakeholders and beneficiaries of the National Development Agenda, Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania, has formed the Ministry of Youth Development to strengthen youth engagement, participation, and socio-economic empowerment. Mr. Vice President, efforts to eliminate violence against women and children remain a priority through the implementation of the second National Action Plan. The rate of female genital mutilations among girls and women aged 15 to 49 has declined from 10% in 2022 to 8% in 2025. In addition, women now constitute 40.5% of members of parliament in the United Republic of Tanzania. Mr. Vice President, access to justice remains as a cornerstone of development and the realization of human rights. Through the Mama Samia Legal Aid campaign, a strategic intervention named after Her Excellency, the President, in recognition of her being a champion for justice. Assistance has been provided to over 4.1 million individuals, including persons with disabilities, over the past 3 years. Digitalization of the justice sector through e-filing, e-registration, and virtual hearings alongside the construction of 9 integrated justice centers is further improving efficiency and accessibility within the justice system. Mr. Vice President, the United Republic of Tanzania remains committed to strengthening democratic institutions, promoting accountability and ensuring integrity in both public and the private sector. We approach human rights not as abstract obligations, but as a practical and a collective responsibility to be upheld in a manner that preserves peace, stability, and the rights of all citizens. In this spirit, Tanzania reaffirms its commitment to human dignity, constitutional order, and the rule of law as we continue to fulfill our national, regional, and international human rights obligations through dialogue, cooperation, and mutual respect. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Robert Oliphant, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Canada via video message.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, honorable friends. I'm honored to address the Human Rights Council at this pivotal moment in human history. We live in an era of great power rivalry, where economic integration is being used as a weapon, where tariffs are being used as leverage, and the multilateral institutions that we have relied on are under profound strain. Around the world, human rights are being undermined, and communities are experiencing increased violence, displacement, and discrimination. In the face of these stark realities, Canada remains committed to working cooperatively with all of you as partners to defend the principles underpinned by the UN Charter, to promote and protect human rights, and to strengthen and reform the UN system to better enable us to respond to the challenges of today and those coming tomorrow. To achieve this, we must transform, innovate, and ensure that the very important UN rationalization efforts do not disproportionately impact the human rights pillar, which has long been underfunded. Les droits de la personne sont le fondement de la justice, de la paix.
The rights of persons are the very foundation of development, and we want to make sure that we can resolutely move forward with these issues in our country and abroad.
For the 2028 to 2030 Human Rights Council term. We do not simply seek a seat. We also know we need to earn it. We earn it by acting with courage, by listening with humility, and by partnering with all those who share a vision of a more just, inclusive, equitable, sustainable, and peaceful world.
The work of the Council has never been as urgent and as vital.
Protect judicial independence and together reinforce accountability mechanisms. We must strive to end impunity for perpetrators of human rights violations and abuses. Economic and social inequalities are rising globally. All human rights are interdependent. It's only through the realization of all human rights, including economic, social, and cultural rights, and by addressing the root causes of conflict, that we can overcome such disparities. Human rights defenders and other members of civil society, including the media, journalists, are increasingly met with intimidation, censorship, arbitrary detention, and violence against their person. They are bravely working on the front lines at great personal risk. Canada is committed to working with the Council to protect freedom of opinion and expression, and a peaceful assembly and association, and to foster a safe and enabling environment for civil society. The evolving threat of transnational repression by states and their proxies undermines sovereignty, national security, and human rights. Canada condemns this aggressive form of foreign interference and will redouble our efforts to keep our citizens and communities safe and to safeguard our sovereignty. Intimidation of and attacks on religious and ethnic minorities, marginalization of Indigenous peoples, discrimination against LGBTQI+ persons, and discrimination and sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls are unacceptable. Canada is committed to advancing gender equality and defending the human rights of all women and girls. To these ends, we are proud to have nominated Dr. Amanda Dale to serve on the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women for the 2027 to 2030 term. Mr. President, people, civilians worldwide, are paying the terrible price of conflict. We call on all states and actors to respect international humanitarian law and international human rights law. There must be accountability for human rights violations wherever they occur and whenever they occur. Mr. President, I speak on behalf of Canada from a place of humility and resolve. Canada continues to confront its own challenges, including in advancing reconciliation with Indigenous peoples. We know we can and must do better. As Prime Minister Mark Carney mentioned in his speech at Davos last month, Canada will be principled and pragmatic in its foreign policy, principled in our commitment to fundamental values, sovereignty, territorial integrity, the prohibition of the use of force except when consistent with the UN Charter, and respect for human rights. But also pragmatic in recognizing that progress is often incremental, that interests diverge, and that not every partner we will work with shares our values. We face many global challenges, and rather than turning inward, we're eager to work with all partners to achieve our shared goals on human rights and to strengthen global institutions, building their credibility and their efficacy to meet the challenges of today and those of tomorrow. If we do have the honor of serving on this council, we will ensure that my words today are as true today and matched by bold and coherent action as is possible. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Excellency. I now have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Marcel de Vink, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Asylum and Migration of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, via video message.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. These are memorable words of Martin Luther King Jr. The meaning of these words still resonates today. They resonate in Ukraine, where families endure winter nights in near-freezing apartments after Russian attacks on energy infrastructure. They resonate in Sudan, where famine continues to spread across the war-torn Darfur region. They resonate in Gaza, in Belarus, in Iran, in Myanmar, because human rights violations never occur in isolation. They ripple far beyond the lives of those directly affected, undermining economic growth, hindering sustainable development, eroding peace and security. And instability does not stop at national borders. It affects other nations through refugee flows, disrupted trade, and regional insecurity, underlining the importance of the protection of human rights and the rule of law. It is crucial to defend essential freedoms, including freedom of expression, free and independent media, and freedom of religion or belief. Since its foundation, the United Nations has played a critical role in promoting and protecting these values around the world. The rapidly changing world order requires us all to work together to build a UN that is way more efficient, effective, and relevant. The UN 80 reform process offers a crucial opportunity to revitalize the organization. In that process, it is essential that we prioritize the protection, the strengthening and reform of the UN human rights system. At this moment, the UN human rights pillar is structurally underfunded with only 1% of the UN's total expenses. This must change. We strongly support the initiative of the UN Secretary General to set up the Human Rights Group. Equally important is a strong and independent office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. The Netherlands will continue to provide voluntary additional contributions to this office, and we encourage our partners to do likewise. In recent years, the Human Rights Council has played a key role in promoting justice and accountability. It established international investigative mechanisms to document violations and preserve evidence. This work must continue. Victims of grave human rights violations around the world have every right to demand justice. Even when accountability may only be achievable in the long term, we must keep pushing for it. The promotion and protection of universal human rights is a shared interest and therefore a shared responsibility. So it is our collective duty to uphold these rights and to support the institutions that protect them. Because justice anywhere brings justice everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I have the honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Yusuf Maitama Tugar, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria, via video message.
President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the government of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, I congratulate Your Excellency, Ambassador Sidarto Reza Suryodipuro, on your election as President of the 20th cycle of the Human Rights Council. I also congratulate the other Bureau members and assure you of Nigeria's cooperation and support. Mr. President, Nigeria remains steadfastly committed to multilateralism and the universality of human rights. Our conviction is guided by the principles of the UN Charter and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Domestically, these fundamental rights and freedoms are guaranteed under Chapter 4 of our Constitution. Accordingly, we believe in the capacity of this Council as an indispensable platform for dialogue, prevention, and cooperation. As such, Nigeria reaffirms its full cooperation with the Council's mechanisms as vital instruments for global promotion and protection of human rights. Mr. President, we live in an era where international peace and security are under siege, threatening the hard-won gains of democracy. These threats are not peculiar to any single state or region. They are a global crisis demanding collective resolve. While no nation is immune, Nigeria's experiences have only deepened our resolve to protect the right to life and the security of all citizens, especially our children, whose right to learn in safety is a sacred priority. To this end, we've accelerated the National Plan on Financing Safe Schools, providing critical investments to secure learning environments. We're also strengthening accountability through ongoing reforms and regional and international cooperation to ensure international human rights and humanitarian standards are mainstreamed into all internal security operations with the primary focus of protecting civilians. Nigeria remains resolute in its commitment to freedom of religion and belief. We view the peaceful coexistence of all faith communities as the essential foundation of our national unity. Nigeria remains resolute in ensuring a society where every citizen, regardless of creed or tribe, stands protected under the shield of justice. Mr. President, Nigeria recalls the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which affirms the right to development and all human rights are interdependent, interrelated, and mutually reinforcing. Accordingly, we recognize the primary responsibility of states to foster an environment conducive to development. In this spirit, and under the Renewed Hope agenda, Nigeria has undertaken bold economic and fiscal reforms aimed at stabilizing our economy and enhancing transparency in our financial systems. These measures are designed to expand our national social investment programs, ensuring that the benefits of growth reach those who need them most. Our priorities are firmly focused on poverty reduction, food security, and creating opportunities for our youth. We're also leveraging our vibrant digital economy to ensure that technological advancement serves as a catalyst for youth empowerment and the realization of economic rights. Through robust social protection, we seek to ensure that every citizen has the opportunity to realize their full potential. Ultimately, we know that inclusive development is our most powerful tool for preventing conflict and reinforcing democratic resilience. Mr. President, Nigeria knows firsthand that the exercise of human rights today is inseparable from environmental protection. Climate change disproportionately affects vulnerable communities, threatening the rights to food, water, health, and livelihoods. Through climate adaptation strategies, Nigeria remains committed to advancing climate action anchored in human rights and sustainable development for future generations. Finally, as Nigeria presents its candidature for membership of the Human Rights Council for the 2027 to 2029 term, we do so with sincerity, determination, and a keen understanding of the responsibilities such membership entails and a firm commitment to constructive engagement. We believe that Council membership is a profound responsibility to uphold universal values, promote prevention, and contribute to collective solutions that protect human dignity worldwide. Nigeria therefore stands ready to work with all partners to advance peace, justice, and sustainable development in Africa and beyond. I thank you all for your kind attention.
Gracias, Excelencia.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Luca Beccari, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Political Affairs, International Economic Cooperation and Digital Transition of San Marino. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. High Commissioner, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, first of all, to extend my warmest congratulations to the President for his recent appointment as President of the Human Rights Council. I'm confident that under your leadership, the Council will continue to serve as a cornerstone of the international human rights system, fostering dialogue, cooperation, and a renewed sense of shared responsibility among its members. In this complex scenario, the Republic of San Marino firmly reiterates its unwavering commitment to the principle enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations and to the central role of the multilateralism as the natural and indispensable framework for addressing global challenges. Upholding this principle ensures that all states, regardless of their size of influence, can engage on an equal footing and contribute meaningfully to global governance. In this respect, the role of Geneva as a hub of multilateral diplomacy must be actively strengthened. Its accessibility, long-standing tradition, and the presence of key international organizations make it an indispensable platform for dialogue, negotiation, and coordinated action. Mr. President, the persistence of armed conflict continues to represent one of the grave threats to the enjoyment of human rights. Today, as we mark the 4th anniversary of the beginning of the Russian aggression against Ukraine, our thoughts go to the victims of this conflict and the continued suffering inflicted upon the civilian population. Once again, San Marino reaffirmed its full support for Ukraine's independence, sovereign and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized border. The human cost of this conflict remains unacceptably high, and we reiterate our call for the immediate cessation of hostility and for renewed good faith diplomatic effort aimed at achieving a just and lasting peace in full respect of the international law. Our deep concern also extends to the Middle East, where violence, instability and suffering continue to affect millions of civilians. We condemn all acts of terrorism, including the horrific attack of 7 October 2023. At the same time, We cannot remain silent in the face of the grave humanitarian situation and the repeated violation of international humanitarian and human rights law affecting civilian population, particularly in the Gaza Strip. In this context, San Marino has shown its humanitarian solidarity by recently adopting a decree to host Palestinian refugees, reaffirming its commitment to humanitarian principle and the protection of civilians affected by war. In September 2025, the Republic of San Marino has formally recognized the State of Palestine as a sovereign and independent state within internationally recognized border and in accordance with the relevant resolutions of the United Nations. We are convinced that peace can only be built on justice, equality, and mutual recognition. Excellencies, beyond this treaty, human rights violations continue to occur in many parts of the world. We remain deeply concerned about the situation in countries where fundamental freedoms are systematically restricted, where arbitrary detention, torture, repression of dissidents persists, and where human rights defenders, journalists, and civil society actors are subject to harassment and persecution. San Marino reiterates its conviction that the international community must train its capacity to respond collectively to human rights violations while recalling the initiative taken outside the multilateral framework risk undermining collective security and the credibility of the international institution. Excellencies, the rapid expansion of artificial intelligence and emerging technology offer tremendous opportunities, yet also presents profound challenges must be met decisively by the Human Rights Council, ensuring that we harness potential of innovation, we simultaneously protect human rights and prevent new forms of discrimination and inequality. Climate change, environmental degradation, food and water insecurity, and wide-ranging inequality continue to have a profound impact on the enjoyment of human rights. Climate change, in particular, is no longer only an environmental issue. It is a human rights issue that is disproportionately affects the most vulnerable. While the objective of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development remain crucial, this commitment must be actively renewed, as their fulfillment is fundamental for creating a more equitable, resilient and sustainable world. Mr. President, San Marino is convinced that international commitments must be matched by concrete action at the national level. In this spirit, my country is taking significant steps to further strengthen the institutional framework for the protection and promotion of the human rights. We are currently working toward the establishment of an independent national ombudsman in line with the Paris Principle and the numerous recommendations received from the United Nations Treaty Body and by the UPR. Through this important reform, San Marino aims to further align itself with international and European standards and to reinforce its commitment to the rule of law and to a people-centered approach to governance. Education and awareness raising are equally essential. Promoting human rights education, particularly among young people, strengthen democratic resilience and foster a culture of respect, tolerance and responsibility. San Marino places particular emphasis on gender equality and has actively promoted numerous initiatives to engage youth on this issue, especially on the phenomenon of gender-based violence. Excellencies, the Republic of San Marino remains steadfast in its support for the abolition of the death penalty worldwide and continues to stand against all forms of inhuman and degrading punishment. We also reaffirm our commitment to promoting inclusion, combating discrimination in all its forms and protecting the rights of persons with disabilities, women, children and minorities. Mr. President, in renewing the Republic of San Marino high consideration for the Human Rights Council, I wish all participants of this 61 section of a successful and fruitful continuation in their work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Dmitry Lyubinsky, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Excelency, tiene usted la palabra.
Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished President, thank you very much indeed. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today's world order is undergoing tectonic shifts, provoking geopolitical instability during the difficult process of establishing a multipolar world. Such a transformation is not easy, particularly for those who are used to being in charge, to being the overlords. Attempts to keep domination, with attempts to reformat the goals and tasks of the activities of the UN, to redraft international law, and the unwillingness to recognize the new process of establishing a multipolar world with different centers of gravity and exerting political and economic pressure on sovereign states who have freely chosen the path to development are all being seen. And this often has gone now to open dictatorship of their will on other states, and sometimes has led to external interference in the domestic affairs of independent states. As a consequence, we are witnesses to unprecedented events when at the last moment the results of electoral processes are annulled and the victors are put behind bars, when the legally elected head of a state is kidnapped by a military intervention, when vital transnational infrastructure is put out of commission overnight, and the search for those genuinely responsible for this seems to be of interest to no one. To put the brakes on establishing a new, just, multipolar world, we are seeing efforts made to counter and to force through measures against those who do not fall into step. We're seeing the collective punishment of whole nations, which as a consequence is illegal sanctions on the rights and freedoms of individual persons, undermining national efforts to establish the well-being of the population and sustainable development of a state. Global practice has demonstrated that using sanctions to exert pressure for your own short-term ideas is not actually in your own interests and actually undermines the economic, political and stability of the initiators of these sanctions and damages their image. We're convinced that the international community must work together in a coordinated manner against this pernicious practice. We are seeing recognition of the need for collective efforts through the adoption by the UN General Assembly of the two important decisions proposed by Russia to defend the UN Charter, that is declaring the 14th of December the International Day to combat colonialism in all its forms and manifestations, and also declaring the 4th of December the International Day against unilateral coercive measures. President, last year the international community marked the 80th anniversary of great victory in the Second World War. The genocide against the peoples of the Soviet Union and the targeted extermination by Nazi Germany of representatives of other ethnicities, and the terrible barbarity of the Nazis and their henchmen were a real challenge to civilization, and we had hoped that we had turned this terrible page in history. But we were wrong. Europe, which suffered such serious losses during the Second World War, has today become the flag bearer of historic aggression, the shameful practice of destroying memorials honouring those who fought against Nazism, consigning to oblivion the evils of the Nazis, revision of the rulings of the Nuremberg Tribunal and the results of the Second World War is on the agenda of the majority of countries in old Europe, and we're seeing that it is being justified by quasi-legal measures. Such revisionism can not be a fertile breeding ground for new spirals of European racial intolerance, xenophobia or discrimination on national or ethnic grounds. The main victims of such policies have been the Russian world, our history, culture, and first and foremost, those who speak the Russian language. The degree of Russophobia in the so-called civilized Europe is such that we can draw parallels with history. But for the Russian people, it is extremely painful to observe how the countries of the collective West are using the people of Ukraine, who are people so close to us. We saw in Kiev in 2014 that ardent nationalists came to power and they started a war against their own population. We saw that they intended to destroy everything linked to Russia in any way: history, culture, faith, values and traditions. And finally, they tried to destroy the most precious thing in any state, and that is the people. And this is why we had to start the special military operation in 2022. President, it was a desire not to ever allow a repeat of the tragedy or the re-emergence of ideologies of racial supremacy that we saw in 1948, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights being adopted. It became the launchpad for the development of the fundamental international human rights instruments, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, whose 60th anniversary the international community will be marking this year. We're convinced that the provisions of the Universal Declaration and the international covenants have lost nothing of their relevance in today's world, and they really meet the needs of civilization and human development today. They do not need to be revised or be renewed. The Bill on Human Rights is the tuning fork that allows us to be in harmony, to have a mutually respectful dialogue on human rights, which does not allow for false notes or for anyone to be out of tune with double standards. By closely following the international covenants, we would not allow those who genuinely rejoice in democracy and human rights to close their eyes to the flagrant violations of the fundamental standards in Ukraine, in the Baltics, in Moldova, and in most Western countries. Being guided by this gold standard, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Russia every year has drafted reports on the human rights situation in different countries of the world. President, it's quite clear that promoting and protecting human rights can only be done together through an equal, mutually respectful dialogue between states, with the international community working together and with support from the UN Human Rights Council, which this year will be marking its 20th anniversary. It is a council that should become the platform for the development of constructive intergovernmental cooperation in this sphere, strengthening the international regime for the promotion and protection of human rights on the basis of justice and equality, pursuant to the goals and principles enshrined in the UN Charter. From our side, we are consistently in favour of constructive, equal interstate dialogue, and we are categorically against the practice of double standards. Human rights, for us, are a category of rights, and they are an objective given reality. They are not some emotional political concept. We consider it vital to do everything in our power to counter bad faith attempts for unilateral interpretations of the fundamental documents in the human rights sphere, and imposing on states non-existent requirements and standards which are in the short-term interests of certain countries. We call for human rights cooperation to exclusively be on the basis of the universally accepted principles and norms of international law. In other words, any problems in this area are not linked to human rights themselves. They are linked to attempts to abuse and manipulate the human rights concepts, norms and standards. Thank you for your attention.
Gracias, Excellency.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Neil Richmond, Minister of State for International Development and Diaspora of Ireland.
Mr. President, it is a privilege to address the Human Rights Council at the opening of this 61st session. I take this opportunity to reaffirm Ireland's unwavering support for the United Nations and the multilateral structures that empower our collective work, to restate our commitment to a strong and fair international legal order with the United Nations and international law at its core. Ireland's engagement at the United Nations is guided by the conviction that human rights, development, peace and security are interlinked and mutually reinforcing. As evidence of this conviction, Ireland was honoured to have been appointed this month, alongside Senegal, as co-facilitator of the review of the status of the Human Rights Council. We appreciate the trust placed in us to carry out this role. Our commitment to the Human Rights Council as the primary intergovernmental body responsible for the promotion and protection of human rights is further reflected in our campaign for membership of the Council for the term 2027 to 2029. If we are elected, we will prioritise the promotion and protection of civil society space and of human rights defenders, the right to food, gender equality and the rights of women, the rights of LGBTIQ+ persons and the rights of persons with disabilities in conflict. We reiterate that human rights are essential for our democracy, for the realisation of human dignity. We commit to not only sustaining our overseas development assistance, but to increasing it. At a time of unforeseen challenges, there is also opportunity to calmly and consistently restate the universality of human rights and the principle of non-discrimination. Colleagues, respect for human rights is crucial for peace, stability and sustainable development. Human rights defenders are at the forefront of this effort. They are central for the realisation and protection of human rights, driving accountability, inclusivity and justice through sheer perseverance. Colleagues, I know all too well the global challenges facing multilateralism, which often manifests as a pushback against established human rights norms, most acutely against gender equality and the rights of LGBTIQ+ persons. A great deal of progress has been made in the achievement of gender equality globally, but this progress has not been linear or equal. We deeply regret that a human rights-based approach to equality and to women's rights is under attack. Nowhere is the oppression of women's rights as evident as in Afghanistan. Since the Taliban's takeover, Afghan women and girls have been systematically excluded from society, forced to a life behind closed doors, losing their basic rights to education, employment, freedom of movement and access to services. Ireland calls for full accountability of those responsible for this horrific situation. Globally, the fight for food security is being lost, driven by broader humanitarian crises fuelled by conflict, climate change and economic and geopolitical dynamics. As a nation with experience of famine, Ireland is acutely aware of the consequences of food insecurity. We take a human rights-based approach to the realisation of the right to food. We are committed to the fight against hunger and malnutrition, with particular emphasis on women and children. Sudan is facing the world's worst famine. This appalling conflict has caused food systems to collapse. Starvation is being weaponised. Over 19 million people are facing high levels of acute food insecurity. Achieving a sustainable peace is urgent and essential. The recently released report from the fact-finding mission documented what it described as a coordinated campaign of destruction. All parties to the conflict must provide sustained and unhindered humanitarian access so that vital aid reaches those most in need. Ireland is keenly aware that the world is experiencing some of the highest rates of armed conflict in 80 years. We are deeply concerned by the impact of conflict on persons with disabilities, including disabilities arising from conflict. Colleagues, today marks the 4th anniversary of Russia's full-scale illegal invasion of Ukraine. Since the 24th of February 2022, indescribable suffering has been inflicted and continues to be inflicted upon the people of Ukraine by Russia and its forces. Millions have been forced to flee their homes. Thousands have been killed and thousands more, including children, have been kidnapped, tortured or arbitrarily imprisoned by Russian forces. Colleagues, Ireland's view is clear. We want peace in Ukraine, a peace that is durable, credible and consistent with international law and the UN Charter. And I say clearly to the Russian delegation who've just left this room that they immediately need to cease its aggression and to engage meaningfully in negotiations. And I repeat that call to her allies, her supporters and indeed those who apologise for her behaviour. Colleagues, a recent UN human rights report details a pervasive climate of impunity for gross human rights violations and serious violations of international humanitarian law by Israeli authorities in the occupied Palestinian territory. Gaza is now home to the highest number of child amputees per capita in the world. Despite the fragile ceasefire, access to prosthetics, healthcare and rehabilitation remains constrained. Humanitarian organisations have been prevented from bringing in humanitarian aid, arbitrarily classified by Israel as dual-use items. In the West Bank, Palestinian life is being increasingly restricted by unprecedented levels of extremist settler violence and illegal settlement construction. Human rights must be centrally enshrined in recovery and peace-building processes across the occupied territories and at the core of an enduring peace for all peoples of the region. Ireland reiterates its belief that the only viable path to lasting peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians is through implementation of a two-state solution. Mr. President, colleagues, in times of crises and conflict, it is imperative that we reaffirm our commitment to multilateralism and the UN system, not to turn away from it. We must reaffirm our commitment to the principles of interrelated, interdependent, inalienable and indivisible human rights. In order to do this, the Office of the High Commissioner must be adequately resourced and empowered to carry out its vital work. We must have a strong, resourced and independent special procedures system which is willing and capable of speaking up for victims of human rights violations, regardless of where those violations take place. We must have a universal periodic review rooted in universality. We must have a robust treaty body system that promotes accountability, access to justice and capacity building. And we, as Member States, must heed their guidance and recommendations. Friends, as we face these challenges, Ireland will remain a consistent voice and a committed partner for human rights. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Excellencia.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Igor Secreta, who is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belarus.
Excelencia, tiene usted la palabra.
You have the floor, Excellency.
Distinguished President, distinguished colleagues, and all participants in this Council meeting, this year is an important one for the international human rights system. This year is 60 years of the two covenants, which are the basis of the International Bill on Human Rights. And also the Human Rights Council is celebrating 20 years, which came to replace the Human Rights Commission. Belarus was against this radical transformation, suggesting that we could fix the Commission, and we were right. It's better not to break, but to build. And it's a good point in time for us to take stock of progress in the human rights sphere. There's nothing to boast about. The paradox is that all mechanisms are there for the human rights structures to work, but results are not there. Today's statements have shown that the HRC is failing more and more, and it is turning into a farce. The majority of states are criticising it. Those who are happy are those who try to impose their recipe for democracy and who are plunging other sovereign countries into chaos and anti-constitutional disorder. The resolutions adopted in this hall have nothing to do with human rights. They serve a completely different objective to justify sanctions, external pressure, lynching, inconvenient states, and separating the world into the good and the bad. The special rapporteurs and so-called independent experts have taken on a role as quasi-investigators and quasi-judicial bodies, and they're interfering in the internal affairs of sovereign states. My question is, on what basis? Some countries are under the microscope here and others are in the blind spot of the Council. But there's no ideal country. Everyone should go through the UPR. All countries should live by the same rules. And we're seeing that the international mechanisms have not looked at Latvia and statelessness in Latvia. We are seeing that in this country, the EU, there are stateless persons. And in Latvia, we're seeing that there's a shrinking space for national minorities and they don't have the right to work and a dignified way of life. We are seeing the inhuman relationship by Lithuania and Poland of those who are striving to reach Europe, the migrants and refugees at the Belarus-EU border. And we're seeing that these countries are as well shutting down the work of journalists and mass media, broadcasting alternative points of view. This is a clear example of the selective work of this body. The Human Rights Council is not looking at this, and we're seeing this in the treaty bodies as well. Adopting unilateral coercive measures is yet another example of this in a civilized world. We're seeing that this has no logic from a human rights point of view. UCMs have an influence only on the citizens of the state concerned and also the citizens of the initiating countries. We are seeing this year that those living in the well-off West have to save on heating whilst they're paying draconian heating bills. And this through the very cold winter. But in Belarus, despite the unprecedented illegal sanctions pressure, is looking out for the interests of its citizens and has not raised the planned tariffs on fuel for households. During the cold period, the state is shouldering the whole of the financial burden so that we're protecting families, pensioners and simple citizens, the most vulnerable citizens of our country. Whilst in Europe, they're paying the price for political miscalculations. And we're seeing a drop in living standards. We are giving priority, as before, to stability, to social protection, to supporting our citizens. And this shows a difference in approaches, a difference in values. Values that a lot of people are talking about over these few days in this room. It's no secret to anyone that the UN is not in the best shape today. We are seeing contradictions and divisions in the human rights agenda, which are the main reason why our organization is suffering. And we are seeing that there's a different human rights agenda. And this human rights agenda is being filled with expensive, useless mandates, and this has led to the deep financial crisis in the organization. Let's honestly recognize the fact that the budgeted UN mechanisms cannot be justified by practical results. It can't be justified politically, financially, or morally. Today's states have imposed a global reform on the organization for streamlining, cuts, and so on. And we are seeing that this is being called upon here in the Human Rights Council as well, our body. But this reform also costs money. And as a rule, those who suffer at the altar of cost-cutting are the most important parts of our work. That is the social side of our work, the protecting those who are most vulnerable, children, older persons, persons with disabilities. And no institutional transformation, no cost-cutting, no streamlining will give results unless we deal with this systemic problem. And that is the issue that states are using this body for their own ends. They are bringing their own agenda to this council, whilst countries bring their bilateral disagreements and geopolitical arguments to the international human rights agenda, and members of the council undermine the impartiality of the cooperation here. Nothing will change. The Council of Human Rights doesn't need cosmetic change. It needs all states to be reminded about the core principles, that is, respect of the sovereign equality of all states, a rejection of interference in the domestic affairs of other states, and using human rights as an instrument of pressure. That is the only way in which the Council can keep its legitimacy in the international human rights protection and promotion system. Distinguished colleagues, today's Belarus is a stable state which firmly follows the path of sustainable development. We have adopted the core principle that human rights start with the right to live decently with dignity, to live under peaceful skies, to have quality education, to have proper pay, to receive highly qualified medical assistance and social support. The most important thing is to be confident in tomorrow for you, yourself and your children. This year in Belarus, it is the year of women, so that we can bolster the role of women in building our sustainable society. And this is what was said when our meeting was opened. We're already talking about that. We're already doing that in Belarus. Belarus' experience has shown that no sanctions can stop a country that is sure of this path, which is progress-oriented and looks at stability and well-being for its citizens. We shall continue to make our contribution to a safe and fair world. We call upon all of us not to ignore the potential of dialogue. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It's now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sihasak Phuangketkeow, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand and former President of the Human Rights Council. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, over 10 years ago, I had the privilege of serving as the President of the Human Rights Council during a pivotal moment of the institutional review. I still recall our retreat in Bangkok, where we gathered for frank and candid conversations. We did not resolve every issue then, but we were able to work across different regional and political groupings to ensure that the Council could better deliver on its mandate to promote and protect human rights for all. As we confront the challenges of multilateralism today, we must think and act collectively. For the success and effectiveness of the Council is not measured by the number of resolutions we adopt, but by how our work translates into real improvements on the ground. Mr. Vice President, human rights challenges today take many forms. One of the most urgent threats is the rapid expansion of transnational online scams. Millions of people worldwide fall victim to these crimes. Trafficked persons are trapped in scam compounds, subjected to coercion, violence, and forced criminality. What we are witnessing are industrial-scale scam networks that have evolved into a global human rights crisis. These operations are allowed to fester because of a lack of rule of law in the countries they operate. Thailand stands both on the front line of impact and at the forefront of international efforts to address the scourge. And we will continue advancing cooperation to dismantle these criminal networks. Mr. Vice President, improving the effectiveness of the Council also means ensuring that we do not squander the Council's time on bilateral issues that have their proper place elsewhere. I intended to talk more about human rights challenges and important work of this Council. But once again, I find myself compelled to respond to far-fetched remarks made earlier by my Cambodian colleague. Rather than contributing to peace as they vocally desire, it is regrettable that Cambodia has chosen time and again to demonize Thailand through false accusations and distorted narratives. If we are if we are to speak honestly, we must ask how this conflict came about in the first place. The reality is that tensions occurred following years of encroachments and repeated provocations seemingly intended to test Thailand's restraint and resolve. This included even attempts to interfere in Thailand's internal politics. That is why tensions escalated, culminating in indiscriminate attacks and civilian deaths. It is a tragic episode in the relations between two neighboring countries. Throughout history, Thailand has had nothing but good intention for our neighbor. We provided refuge to those fleeing conflict. We supported humanitarian assistance and reconstruction following Cambodia's civil war. Our intention has never been confrontation, because we understand that our peace is inseparable from Cambodia's peace. Today, a ceasefire is in place. This should have marked a turning point towards rebuilding trust and moving forward as good neighbors. Yet, instead of prioritizing reconciliation, Cambodia continues to internationalize the issue and undermine the prospects for peace. The allegations by Cambodia are that we are seizing territory. But the truth is that both sides have negotiated a ceasefire and agreed that troops are to remain where they are at the time of ceasefire, pending a final resolution through dialogue. What we need now is to de-escalate tensions and not stir up public sentiments. Instead, after the ceasefire, premeditated provocations continue to occur. Thai soldiers continue to encounter landmines, and shots are still fired across borders, even today. But let me be clear, Thailand remains committed to dialogue, and I repeat, it is our duty to defend our sovereignty, territorial integrity, and safety of our people at all costs. So I must ask my Cambodian colleague, once again, do you choose the path of peace or the path of continued tensions and conflict, which unfortunately leads to more losses and suffering? Thailand's choice has been clear from the start. The onus rests on Cambodia to decide whether they would like to move forward with us, because we all have that commitment to our peoples. Mr. Vice President, peace is not just the absence of conflict between states. Real peace begins at home. Human rights can only thrive where there is respect for rule of law and accountable leadership, where people can pursue their livelihoods in an open and free society, and most importantly, where there is full respect for human rights for all. Thank you.
Gracias, Excellencia.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Elnur Mammadov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to address the high-level segment of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. We extend our sincere congratulations to His Excellency Ambassador Suryo Dipuro on his election as the President of the Council, and we wish the newly elected Bureau every success in their endeavors. As the Council marks its 20th anniversary, Azerbaijan, being a founding member of the Council, values its vital role in advancing human rights worldwide through constructive dialogue, beneficial cooperation, and dedicated efforts. We remain steadfast in our commitment to enhancing international solidarity and effective multilateralism, positioning the United Nations as a central pillar of the global system.
Excellencies, the world is facing global challenges, and the climate change as a major crisis adversely impacting the lives of millions demands our collective action to mitigate its enormous risks. In this regard, COP29, successfully hosted by Azerbaijan, represented an important breakthrough in accelerating climate action and achieving our collective obligations stemming from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In April this year, Azerbaijan will host the 82nd session of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific. The session that will bring together key stakeholders and ministers from across Asia and the Pacific under the theme of leaving no one behind, advancing a society for all ages in Asia and the Pacific, will provide a platform to discuss emerging demographic trends and socio-economic priorities, as well as inclusive solutions for a sustainable future. Azerbaijan will also host the 13th World Urban Forum this May under the theme Housing the World Safe and Resilient Cities and Communities. The forum will feature for the first time the Summit of Heads of State and Government and will contribute to the 2026 report of the UN Secretary-General on the implementation of the new urban agenda. Furthermore, the upcoming 7th World Forum for Intercultural Dialogue in Baku later on this year, so-called Baku process, will continue our mission of fostering non-discrimination and peaceful coexistence across cultures. Excellencies, last year marked a historic milestone in the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. On August 8, 2025, in Washington, D.C., the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia signed a joint declaration, witnessed by the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, which set a path towards normalization of bilateral relations and establishment of a lasting peace in the region. At the Washington summit, the foreign ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia also initialed the text of the draft agreement on establishment of peace and interstate relations between the two countries, turning a new page toward regional stability. The last 6 months have been pivotal for the normalization of interstate relations. During this short period of time, Azerbaijan not only lifted the restrictions for cargo transportation to and from Armenia through our territory, but also started exporting oil products to Armenia. The Trump route for international peace and prosperity, which is one of the key outcomes of the Washington summit, will ensure not only unimpeded access connecting two parts of Azerbaijan through the Zangezur corridor, but will also serve as a linchpin for the middle corridor connecting east to west. However, we must still address the painful legacies of the 30-year conflict. In this respect, at the high-level event commemorating the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Azerbaijan announced 3 pledges. First, clarifying the fate of the missing persons from the conflict. Second, demining of its liberated territories and rehabilitation of the mine victims. And third, safe and dignified return of displaced persons to their ancestral lands, which should also include peaceful return of ethnic Azerbaijanis to Armenia. On the first pledge, our priority remains to clarify the fate of over 4,000 Azerbaijani citizens who went missing during the conflict, and we call upon the relevant UN bodies to assist us in bringing comfort to their families. On the issue of demining, over 400 individuals, mostly civilians, have fallen victim to the mines and unexploded ordnances after the end of the Second Karabakh War. And we have established a national SDG 18 specifically for mine action. We express our gratitude to our international partners in demining and reiterate our call for the Council and Special Procedure Mandate holders to address the profound impact of landmines on the enjoyment of human rights. And on the issue of return of displaced persons, we have embarked on large-scale post-conflict reconstruction efforts in the liberated territories, and our Great Return program will enable hundreds of thousands of displaced persons to return to their lands in safety and dignity. As of now, more than 70,000 people return and peacefully reside in the liberated territories of Azerbaijan. Last but not least, in our pursuit of justice and the rule of law, we also brought to justice those accused of having committed atrocious crimes during the conflict based on our national legislation and international law. In this context, we recall the opinion of the Working Group on Arbitrary Detention issued last February, which confirmed the compatibility of the legal processes in Azerbaijan with applicable international standards. Early this month, the national courts rendered judgments in a number of criminal cases stemming from the conflict, whereby Azerbaijan exercised not only its right, but also its duty under international law to investigate and prosecute war crimes and crimes against humanity. In conclusion, Azerbaijan reaffirms its commitment to international peace, the promotion of international law, and the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms for a better and shared future. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Yershan Ashikbayev, First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to address this Council, which remains the most important forum for advancing human rights and marks its 20th anniversary this year. I would also like to congratulate Ambassador of Indonesia on assuming the presidency of the Human Rights Council and to assure him of my delegation's full support. Mr. Chair, the global security architecture is currently experiencing unprecedented strain due to geopolitical tensions and macroeconomic uncertainty. We see rising disputes in different regions where mistrust grows faster than dialogue. In these challenging times, we echo the Secretary General's call to place the UN Charter and universal human rights at the center of all our actions. Respect for international law, the rule of law, and dignity of every person is not optional. It's a foundation of peace, security, and trust between nations. Kazakhstan is convinced that global challenges must be jointly addressed through diplomacy and cooperation, which should always prevail in international affairs. Kazakhstan has always demonstrated a deep and genuine commitment to human rights at both national and international levels. In line with the Fair Kazakhstan concept, the country has significantly strengthened its national human rights system. The Constitutional Court has been reinstated, the mandate of Human Rights Commissioner expanded, and further measures are being implemented to prevent torture and ill treatment, protect the rights of women, children, and vulnerable groups, and enhance the transparency, accountability, and effectiveness of public administration. Our country is undergoing one of the most significant processes of political transformation in its history, ensuring that progress is shared fairly across the society. A few months ago, President Tokayev announced a new phase of parliamentary reforms to deepen democratization and strengthen fundamental human rights. To ensure that reforms are fully consistent with Kazakhstan's international human rights obligations, a constitutional commission has been established. All of its meetings were open and broadcast publicly with broad participation from legal professionals, human rights advocates, and parliamentarians and academia. Following an extensive process and feedback received, the Constitutional Court proposed to adopt a new constitution. The preamble of this draft of new constitution enshrines unity, solidarity, and interethnic harmony as the foundations of statehood. The idea of a just Kazakhstan, the principle of law and order, respect for nature, and the provision that the people of Kazakhstan are the sole source of power and bearers of sovereignty are also consolidated at the constitutional level. Particular attention is given to developing human capital, education, science, protecting environment, safeguarding culture, and promoting innovation. This fundamentally important turnaround emphasizes that the future of the state is determined not by natural resources, but by human capital and the achievement of its citizens. For the first time, the draft constitution includes protection of personal data from illegal collection, storage and dissemination in the digital environment. Thus, the new constitution is human-centered and forms a modern, balanced and sustainable state model based on the rule of law, the accountability of public authority and the priority of human rights. Changes also include the establishment of single-chamber parliament, the National Council, and the introduction of the position of the Vice President. A new constitutional model will be put to a nationwide referendum on March the 15th this year. It reflects our commitment to participatory governance, inclusive decision-making, and effective human rights implementation. Distinguished delegates, we firmly believe in international cooperation and multilateral system capable of delivering on the commitments of the UN Charter based on fundamental human rights, faith in the dignity and worth of human person, and in equality and justice. Kazakhstan has consistently supported international initiatives aimed at reducing conflict and seeking balanced, sustainable solutions. In this context, Kazakhstan's participation in the Board of Peace is a logical continuation of our foreign policy based on dialogue and respect for international law grounded in the UN Charter. Similarly, the global initiative to galvanize political commitment to international humanitarian law, launched by Kazakhstan together with Brazil, China, France, Jordan, South Africa, and the International Committee of the Red Cross, aims to strengthen the implementation of international humanitarian law and contribute to the maintenance of peace and security. Since 2003, Kazakhstan hosts the Triennial Congress of Leaders of World and Traditional Religions, which became an influential international interface dialogue platform fostering global peace and development. With the support of the UN Secretary General and partner states, Kazakhstan now hosts the new UN Regional Center for SDGs for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. Today, Central Asia is a region with tremendous potential, but also with shared challenges. Among them, water resources is the most pressing issue. In April 2026, Astana will host the Regional Ecological Summit. This high-level forum, initiated by President Tokayev and supported by the United Nations, will address climate change, desertification, biodiversity loss, and regional environmental challenges in Central Asia. Kazakhstan has also taken the lead in establishing an international water organization under the UN auspices to respond to global water stress and to align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, especially SDG 6. These initiatives reflect Kazakhstan's role not only as regional hub, but also as proactive contributor to global peace and stability. Mr. President, in conclusion, I would like to reaffirm Kazakhstan's unwavering commitment to protecting and promoting human rights and freedoms. I want to emphasize that democratic reforms in Kazakhstan are irreversible. We will keep engaging in constructive and respectful international dialogue, guided by the conviction that human rights, sustainable development, and international peace and stability are mutually reinforcing. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Kaja Kallas, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission. This is a video message.
Dear Excellencies, I'm sorry not to be with you today, but I want to share a few words with you. First, I want to congratulate His Excellency President of the Human Rights Council in its 20th anniversary year. Birthdays are always moments for reflection, and there is a lot to be proud here. The Council has been agile in tackling human rights crises and new challenges, including those related to climate change and new technologies. And it has made tangible progress, from preventing abuse to accountability, capacity building and ensuring peer pressure among countries to do better. At the same time, we know the challenges to human rights are unprecedented.
We are 4 years into Russia's full-scale war on Ukraine, and Russia continues to violate international human rights law, international humanitarian law, and the laws of war. And words can barely describe the scale of human suffering in Gaza, Sudan, Yemen, Afghanistan, Iran, Myanmar, Haiti, Venezuela. But let us not grieve when we can lead a new defense of human rights instead. Which brings me to my second thanks, to High Commissioner Volker Turk. You recently joined us in Brussels for our meeting of EU foreign ministers, and therefore, you know you can count on the European Union to keep defending human rights, to be a reliable, predictable partner to others in this work, and to preserve the collective vision that inspired the creation of the United Nations, as well as the Human Rights Council more recently. As the High Commissioner has said, investment in human rights is affordable, but the human cost of underinvestment is immeasurable. In other words, we must do more. Within the European Union, we are now advancing work to promote equality and fight discrimination. Internationally, we continue our investment in programs that support all human rights in practice, civil, cultural, economic, political, and social, including the right to development. This includes defending the defenders. In the last 10 years, the EU has provided urgent support to over 94,000 at-risk defenders, because defending human rights is a team effort. Individuals, groups, NGOs, civil society are part of the team, as you all are too. Dear Excellencies, there are two types of people in this world, those who have lived with the rights and those who haven't. And when you have experienced both, as I have, you fight tooth and nail for what you have got. But human rights belong to everyone, everywhere. Human rights enable peace and security and economic development. But they also bring joy, fulfillment, and prosperity to our daily lives. So let us use this 20th anniversary year to reflect not only on what we have achieved or the challenges to human rights today, but on where we go next to defend them. Thank you and all the best.
Gracias.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my honour to give the floor to Ms. Shirley Botchway, Secretary-General of the Commonwealth. This is a video message.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my honour to address this Council for the first time as Commonwealth Secretary-General. Our family of nations is home to 1/3 of humanity, and human rights are our bedrock. They are enshrined in our Charter and reaffirmed time and again by our heads of government, most recently in Samoa in 2024, where leaders renewed their commitment to build peaceful, just, and resilient societies in which human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. But today we face profound upheaval, conflicts, climate impacts, economic fragility, and democratic backsliding are eroding the conditions that allow rights to be fully enjoyed. Trust in institutions is weakening. Civic space is under pressure. Inequalities are deepening. And it is the most marginalized who carry the heaviest burdens. These conditions do not respect borders, and they cannot be addressed by retreating from cooperation. If we allow global fractures to widen, human rights will be among the first casualties. If we stand together, they can be our strongest source of resilience. That conviction guides the Commonwealth's new strategic plan, and it shapes our preparations for the 2026 Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting under the theme Accelerating Partnerships and Investment for a Prosperous Commonwealth. A prosperous future requires more than statistical growth. It requires societies grounded in dignity, inclusion, and justice. Human rights are not an accessory to prosperity. They are a precondition for it. Mr. President, the Commonwealth is translating this principle into practical support. Over the last 4 years, we have assisted more than 40 member countries to engage effectively in the Universal Periodic Review, implement their accepted recommendations, and reduce treaty body reporting backlogs. This work strengthens accountability, reinforces democratic practice, and ensures that rights commitments are not left on paper, but lived in people's daily realities. We are proud of our long-standing partnership with the Office of the High Commissioner and the Trust Fund for the participation of LDCs and small island states. Through the Commonwealth Small States Office in Geneva, we help amplify the voices of countries which are too often unheard in global fora. This is a strategic investment by the Commonwealth in a more inclusive, credible, and effective multilateral system. We also support the establishment and strengthening of national human rights institutions compliant with the Paris Principles, recognizing their essential role as independent guardians of rights at the national level. Our collaboration with the Commonwealth Forum of National Human Rights Institutions promotes shared learning, innovation, and collective strength. Mr. President, rights must extend to everyone, including those who are most at risk of marginalization. Commonwealth heads of government have reaffirmed their commitment to the rights of persons with disabilities. Working with persons with disabilities and their representative organizations, we are developing a Commonwealth Disability Inclusion Action Plan to help countries embed inclusion in law policy and practice. It is a reminder that inclusivity is essential. Across all these efforts, our focus is clear: to help build societies that are resilient because they are rights-respecting, prosperous because they are inclusive, and peaceful because justice is real and trusted. Excellencies, the Commonwealth's message to this Council is one of partnership and purpose. We will continue to support our member countries to uphold the universal values they have freely committed to. We will continue to defend civic space, democratic integrity, and the rule of law. We will continue to spotlight the lived realities of small states. And we will continue to work with all who share our determination to advance human rights as the foundation of stability, prosperity, and human dignity. At a moment when global systems are strained, let us demonstrate that multilateralism holds firm and that human rights remain the compass by which we navigate an uncertain world.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. This was the last dignitary that we could accommodate in this meeting. Excellencies, esteemed participants, we will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. to continue with the high-level segment. I hereby declare closed the 5th meeting of the 61st session of the Human Rights Council. Thank you.